Okay, everyone, welcome to Mixing Music Analog and mixingmusicanalog.com, and here on our YouTube channel. And we have our good friend Chris Yetter from Audioscape back with us again. If you remember 6 months ago, maybe, Chris was on the channel. When we first got up and rolling, he was the first and the only person to really step up and really help Mixing Music Analog get rolling. And Chris, thanks so much for joining me. And as we just said a few minutes ago, and I want to say it again publicly, I can't thank you enough for the support you've given us over here. We love your gear, and you've just been really supportive. And a lot of companies with a channel very small that doesn't get a lot of eyeballs, it's kind of in there just getting themselves going. A lot of companies don't even want to talk to us, you know, and so they want, you know, 1 million subscribers and 500,000 views on every video. We just started off and you were like, hey man, let's see if we can work together, and I'd be glad to help. So thanks so much for joining me, and thanks so much for the support. I really do appreciate it, my friend.
Oh, thank you, David. Honestly, I feel like we're a small company as well. And we just, you know, your ethos, the way everything you guys run your videos, we just felt it would be a good fit to send some stuff to you guys and see, you know, what your impressions were of it. So, you know, thank you for, you know, doing an excellent job to showcase, you know, each piece of equipment we've sent over.
Yeah, and they've all been really good. And a lot of people watching this, a lot of people have contacted you. We've had students buy some stuff from you. And if you guys want to check out more of Audioscape stuff, and they always got stuff going on, the link will be in the description box below for sure. And as I say, every time we talk about Audioscape, you got to make sure you get on their Instagram and their Facebook, because I think your process, Chris, is still the same. You kind of launch, what did we build this week or last week, a couple of times a week, and you got to get out there with your credit card on the website, because you got to wait, because they build these things, right, one at a time by hand. They're tested all by hand. It's a small boutique shop. It's not a mass production where you can just buy these things at any time, which is great because it makes them kind of special, and you know that they've been built with the highest quality. So you want to make sure you're following all of their social media, because, right, Chris, that's how you're still doing it. You can't just, unfortunately, you just can't call up and go, give me 3 1176s and an EQP and a this and a that, and just get a shopping cart full of stuff all at the same time, typically.
Yeah, well, it is a small shop, you know, smaller than what most people think it is. And we have an awesome, incredible crew, and everybody here, you know, they know what everything is. But in addition to the socials, you can sign up for our email list as well. And that also sends out the same information, because, you know, not everyone's on social media, which we get it, you know, so, yep. But most everyone has an email. So you can sign up for our email list. It's right there on our website. And then you'll know what we're dropping on Wednesdays or Saturdays. You know, every now and then we do a small pre-order too, like a batch of 25 of something, like, you know, we did the last batch of 25 we did was EQPs, and then bus comps were before that. And you know, it's just, we're building in small batches. That's how we feel like, you know, we get the best results out of this, instead of trying to build a couple hundred of something and then having something slip through the cracks. So.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. So everyone follow them in all the description box. All the links will be below. So make sure you go check them out. So now why Chris is here with me today, amongst other reasons, because we like talking every now and again. Recently, a lot of you have watched the video that we did on the 1176 style compressors. So a while back, I was talking to you, Chris, about, hey, I'm going to get an 1176, and you have 3 of them. And we started talking about, well, which one should we get? And I wasn't really sure. And, you know, let's go with the black face, because that's the most common one. And it was your suggestion to say, you know, they're all a little different from each other. It would be really cool if we had a video where we compared all 3 on the same source material. And I says, you know, that's not a bad idea. And that's what we did. So we brought all 3 in. Chris was gracious enough to send them to us. We did not listen to these things beforehand. I mean, just to make sure that they worked. That was about it. You know, did we plug them in right? And that was really it. And for everyone who didn't see the video, again, link will be in the description box below, where Dave and myself, we sat at the console on source material, and we ran the same source tracks through these 3 compressors. And we tweaked the knobs, attack and release, and we were just listening for what the differences were. And there are 3 distinct sounds to them, and they're all in that family of the 1176, but they're all slightly different. And some things sound better on other sources than others, depending on who you are. So I think Dave and I we disagree on one of them. We'd say, I like that on vocals. And he'd say, no, I like the 76D on the vocal. I'm like, I like the A on the vocal. And it was just really a good way to kind of showcase, well, what are the differences between these? And the reason why I wanted to talk to Chris was, we know now what the sound differences are. I mean, we can kind of describe it. You can watch the video, but I'm always curious about, some of the tech a little bit without getting too far into the weeds on why are these things sound different? Obviously the parts inside can't be identical or they wouldn't be different, but can you shed some light, Chris, on these three? What makes these three things different? I mean, what it about this design or the circuits or whatever? Because I know the original 1176s, they were all built at different time periods, the 60s, the 70s. And so how did you go about that? Because I don't think there's anyone out there that I've seen that has a 76F. I mean, I've never even seen one before Audioscape, unless you go way back and look at an original or something.
Yeah, well, the F revision, that was still all blackface as well. We decided to have that be a different front panel just to differentiate it from the other revisions. But the originals were not that way, as many people know. They were all blackface, and you'd have to look at the serial number to tell whether it was a Rev F or a Rev D.
There you go. Right. That's right.
Or a Rev E, when they introduced the 220 volt option, that's the only difference there with that Rev. That's why there's numbers in between, but they were really small changes in between. But these three models, these three revisions, they all retain the input transformer as well. And then after that, the later revisions, they opted for the IC. They got rid of the input transformer and have the IC input. So those are a little bit different there from Rev G and on. As far as, they just evolved. Each revision evolved in a different way. And it's not that anyone's, like you pointed out, better or worse than the other. It's just, where does it fit? And as we started building each revision for ourselves here, our studio, our little demo room, all that, we realized that this is useful to have every single, flavor, for whatever precision, piece of material you're working on at that point in time. So there are striking differences. They're still all like a 76, but there are striking differences. As many know, the Rev A is very, it's aggressive in its saturation. It's, characteristics. It can get, there can be a lot of that, and that could be, a little bit much for people sometimes, but, as been proven over the years, great on vocals.
Yeah.
One thing I will say about our 76A is that it's got like a good, I feel like the low end is pretty solid on that. You could still use it on everything. It's just, it might be too much if the saturation's too much and you've already, whatever the context is. But also it might seem like it's too much if you're soloing, a track, but then you put it in the context of a mix, then it's,
right. Yeah.
So it's, it's a treat. The line amp and the output amp in the Rev A and the Rev D are both the same. They're based around the 1108s, which was a completely separate, different preamplifier that was made back then and they used to sell. And we actually have a product that's loosely based around that as well, called the V108, but I don't want to veer too far off from 76 land, but we haven't made those in a while. It's, long story short, it's a great sounding amplifier, and that's, a big part of the sound in both those revisions. So it's only like when they got to Rev F has some significant differences, and those are probably like Rev A and Rev F are definitely kind of the most like worlds apart in a sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
You kind of get more of a modern hi-fi sound sometimes from Rev F, when comparing to Rev A. There's still some character there. It's not completely colorless, but it's definitely more, not as, the saturation's not crazy. And they also changed the metering in Rev F. So it's op amp based, and it's actually a lot like more accurate, the metering in Rev F, as far as it still has to drift up to 0, but it's still like as far as its accuracy, because you'll notice on Rev A and Rev D you just start burying the needle, and that's just
that's a good point. So is it because we did notice that, and I just assumed, is it because the attack time, maybe are the attack times the same on your spec sheet? I thought it's not. Okay, so I wasn't sure if it was the attack that was causing the needle to maybe react a little different, or is it just the way those types of needles, those meters were? because they do react a little differently. They're not exactly the same.
They kind of fixed that around Rev F, but we keep the quirks in there from the earlier.
Yeah.
Keep it vintage accurate as if you were buying one of those revisions. So we just tell people if they get concerned to just use your ears, you know.
I was just going to say that's really the key, isn't it? All looking at the meter. And what's great about working with hardware in general, we talk a lot about this on this channel. When you're working in a DAW on a plugin and you're looking at a screen like I'm looking at a screen and there's a plugin on the window in front of you and you're turning the knobs with your mouse or your surface control, you're looking at the plugin and you're using your eyes instead of your ears. When you have a rack of gear that's 3 feet away to your right from this console, you have to go over there, make the adjustment, come back to the sweet spot, and you're not looking at the compressor anymore. You're really just listening, right? And you're hitting maybe the insert, you're taking the thing in and out of the circuit on the channel, but you're not really studying what's going on the compressor, with the exception of, okay, we getting some compression, and then, whether it's 5 dB, 6 dB, 7 dB, it almost doesn't matter. Where does it sound okay to you? And then whatever the knobs on the thing are, is irrelevant, really. And I find that to be true, more so than when you're working with a plugin. It's right in front of you, that plugin, and you're looking at the needle and you're going, oh, the needle, maybe the meter's not, and you forget to listen, is my point.
No, that's an excellent point. What it adds with the workflow, it makes you listen more. And hardware is more work, a lot of times, but I feel like it's worth it.
Without a doubt.
So you got the metering, like we were talking about, and then you're letting in more signal on the input on those earlier on the earliest revision in particular. You're letting in 5 dB more. So you got those two things working against you. That equals the needle just burying.
Yeah.
So that's and then on top of that, you got tolerances. We're using in Rev A and Rev D, we're using carbon composition resistors, and all to get that. And, some people debate on that in tech circles and things like that, but it's what was used back then, and in the audio section in particular. And so that's important to the sound. Around Rev F, they changed to carbon film. So that's what we use, in the audio section. And they did, like I mentioned, they changed the output amp in Rev F. They also, it's a completely different output transformer. Both Rev A and Rev D have the same, output transformer. And it's actually the same output transformer that they use in the LA3A that they use in the Rev F.
Okay.
So a lot of people, it's not really talked about too much, and that's just an interesting distinction. So it's that push-pull output amp that they added, which also I've seen some people report that Rev D is the quietest, and in our experience, Rev F is the quietest too. If you're looking for what's going to be the quietest, cleanest, after building, what seems like a lot of these things, I can't even count, but right now, consistently Rev F has been the quietest revision for sure. And
that's because of the accumulation of all those components just together. It just seems like the noise floor. It's not that any of your products are noisy. When we some of the old gear, they're noisy. Your gear is not noisy in that respect. It's still very usable, very quiet. You don't hear any of the all the stuff.
All about getting the best tone, best sound with the lowest voice, because we know in a sense you're kind of competing with digital in a weird way.
Sure.
So it's a different world, than as much as we want to build things like it's 1970, it is a different world out there, and we want things to be as sound the best they can, but be as low noise as possible. So, but with certain exceptions, like the Rev A, if you start tweaking things and modifying the circuit, then it's not a Rev A anymore.
It's not a Rev A, right?
So we don't do that. I could change a 100K resistor for 22K and then end up with something that's quieter and lower the gain amp section. But it's not, to me, it doesn't sound like a Rev A anymore. So the Rev F is quieter, though, to answer your question, because the output amp that they changed to the push-pull, which is based around the 1109, which came after the 1108, it's got I believe an extra 6 dB of gain, clean gain there in that. And so the balance of everything is shifted in a more positive way for the signal to noise ratio. Basically.
Got it. So now, before we move on to the next thing, here's how I categorize these threes. And I'm just curious because, my partner Dave, the way he kind of lists the way, If you want something to sound this way, use this one. If you want something to sound, I'd be curious to get your take. So I look at those 3 units and I said that the 76D, the black panel, to me is the more woolly, the more round, the more warm, right? The 76A to me has the most aggression and it's the most bright, for lack of a better word. So you want something to be a little bit more upper mid range, it sounds that. And the Rev F to me sits right in the middle of those two. So like, I almost feel like if I want something like an lead vocal, I tend to use the A or the F a lot, not so much the D. I find using the D more on like bass and more lower frequency instruments. That's how I kind of categorize in my head. My partner Dave thinks of it completely different. And I wonder, and that what this is so great is that there is no, it's all subjective. They all sound good and they all will work on anything. It's just a matter of what you like. How do you kind of stack those in your mind, like from a mixing point of view or from a tonal point of view?
I think those, the way you've generally described them is how we typically generally describe them, and myself included, like, down to everything, like more woolly low end on the D. F typically has a tighter low end, we've noticed, which is sometimes works great for some drums if you want a little bit of punch as well.
Mm-hmm.
But upper mid range in the A, all that is exactly how we use to describe it. And sometimes people hear upper mid range and they think, oh, it's going to be too harsh. And it's a pleasant sort of saturation and grit you get from that, from the A there. And there's a reason why it's, become an industry standard for sure.
And think about analog in general. I don't seem to think, when I hear that word harsh and boosting top end, like you hear a lot of that in the digital world with certain plugins. There are a lot of plugins are great that way, but certain plugins, like where the real test is in the top end when things get really brittle and like the nails on the chalkboard. I don't experience any of that with any of the analog that I have here. None of it. It's like it's almost like you could keep pushing as much top end into this stuff as you want. And it always sounds smooth to me. And I don't know if that's just, again, the whole way analog works and the circuitry and the way as you push audio through this stuff, it tends to do that. It doesn't get brittle, at least not the gear any of the gear you guys have or any of the other gear that I've used here. I seem to get that at all. Or in digital, you always seem to be fighting that top end and that kind of, I call it like the knives being thrown at your ears and you're kind of, but in analog, I don't hear that as much.
Yeah, it's a typical, I guess, general rule that boosting highs in analog is where it's at for sure. And cutting, if you're going to cut in the digital realm, you're fine. But yeah, you start boosting those highs in the digital realm, it definitely seems to be, you're fighting a little bit of things there, and you have to, that's just so beautiful about analog. You can get from point A to point B. It feels like a lot faster. It's a little bit more setup, but the end result, there's, undoubtedly people in the box that can get great results and have, using, but they, the path to get there can take a while versus, you just put it through the analog device and you're good. There's not really.
We talk about that on this channel all the time. And it's a thing that half the audience really gets and understand. And the other half of the audience gets really upset by those kinds of statements, but it's true. And again, like we always say here, we're not taking anything away from the digital in the box. I do that every single day. They both have their places, but analog in general, overall, in my limited experience since the last year and a half of us working on these projects together, it was amazing to me how quick you could get to the sound, even though you spent truly a fair amount more time on the front end setting things up, whether it's comping stuff in your DAW and routing it out to a console and patching everything in. It's not just, click and everything just opens up on the screen, but there is a definite overall sound benefit, I feel, that comes from all of that extra work. And then once you get good at it, you start flying around it. And to me, it has its own sound. It's complete. I always say, it's not better than digital because that's word, again, people get upset about that word, but it is way different. And that's not to say that you can't get great results in digital, because obviously you can, and there's lots of engineers that do, and there's we do a combination of, you know, both. But there is something very special, I feel, about analog that's worth, you know, looking at if you're in that market. There is a difference. It's not all hype. There is a reason why people still use it, you know, when they don't have to. You know, you don't have to.
Aside from sounding excellent, you know, and easy end results, you know, after you get it set up, you mentioned earlier an intangible, which is, you know, it's away from you. You have to use your ears more. It forces, you know, some of these other things that, you know, it kind of forces you into is, you know, all these other intangibles come with it. So you know, and a lot of us, I think we all still listen to a lot of classic albums, and like, and it sort of puts you in that workflow and work environment when you're using analog, you know, the same way that all these classic albums are being made, you know. So
and that's how they were made. They were all made analog in a studio on a console and a racks of gear, you know, and that's how it was made. And there's a sound there that you are familiar if you grew up on that stuff, or if you enjoy listening to that kind of music. So, okay. So for everyone, again, go check out the video. The link will be in the description box. If you want to see the 376 video, go check it out and see what you think. And then, you know, hit up Chris and try to get yourself a 76 or 2 or 3. So now, Chris, I also know that, you got a couple of new products that I saw in a couple of photos at the NAMM show that are really interesting to me. Tell us a little bit about that and what's going on there, and when are those products going to be available?
You should have come out to the NAMM show. You could have auditioned them and demoed them. We have them. You actually heard them too. It was we like to do we promote our new products at NAMM, but we also like to do first looks on what's upcoming and, you know, going to be out in like 4 to 6 months. If they're ready to show, then we'll show them. And so we have the DA3A, which is a continuation of the D3A. It's we had actually a really a good customer friend of ours, Jay Doucette. He had a D3A. He loved the sound, but he really longed for the form factor of the original, where it was 2U. And, you know, he just wanted that sort of ergonomic feel. So we made basically a prototype. This is like, you know, 2 months before NAMM. And
really?
made a prototype. It was like, oh, this works pretty well. So then we just made, you know, and we actually made that one special for him because it was his idea, and put like D3AJ on it or whatever. And then we, you know, made another one, the DA3A, and then we, you know, shipped it out just in time for the show right before. So it's basically, it's got all the same functions. It's just some people prefer the original form factor and having like more space in between the controls. Some people prefer to have, you know, they don't have much rack space and they want 1U. So we're going to offer still the D3A in the 1U format and the DA3A in the 2U format.
And then you also have the 500 series, which is the ones I have.
Yeah, the
D3A. So for people that don't know what he's talking about, I'll say it is the LA3A. So the 2U, the small blackface one that everybody sees, that's the new, and it looks, you know, it looks just like it. It's got the, you know, the nice meter on it with the bigger controls. Whereas the 500 series rack is, you know, obviously smaller. They're nice and convenient, but the knobs are smaller, right? So you have less space in there. So are those two like the pair that I have? Is it the same circuit that's going into this thing, or are those slightly different?
It's got the same options. I know the racked version do have the what do you call it? The chain switch where you can chain channel 1 and a channel 2 really easily. Yeah. And that's a really useful mod, because once you start cranking all those controls, you can kind of get like, it's the only way I can describe it. It's almost like the effect of all buttons in on an 1176 is what it sounds like when you have channel 1 going into channel 2 with the way it's implemented in this, which is really fun. It's not something you'd use all the time, obviously, but it's a nice feature to have. So that's the only main difference between like the 500 series version. We do have the Clear Mountain mod just built into these, where they are, because there's just a ton of gain on tap, and it just makes them so quiet and nice, and it doesn't affect any of the tone of the unit. So yeah, you know, as you know, you have, you know, a V3A with the, and it's just, so that's, it doesn't have like the different gain options as far as that goes. We really like just having it set in that way because there's so many other little mods and things that are going on, with the stereo link and all the controls. It just starts getting out of control.
So now will this product be a stereo unit?
Yep.
Or is it, because I know the originals you can buy a mono unit, or yours are just going to be two rack stereo? Okay, cool. Great. That could be really useful on a lot of different things.
Stereo's where it's at a lot of times, for sure. It's there's some like a lot of use still with mono, but it's nice to have stereo of certain things like the 3As and so it also I know our decomp is stereo as well. That's really cool.
Right.
And I know we haven't talked about this yet, but the upcoming 260 VU, that was definitely a big announcement as well. And that is like a dual mono 160 VU type of device. So it's lots of times, it's almost a similar concept, half rack, the originals were.
Yep.
And lots of times, then you have to buy the rack kit if you want to share. And,
that's right. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. You have to buy that. And the design actually that we have for that's it's very similar to the original, the aftermarket rack kit that you'd have to get in that, but they're not two separate modules. It is just one straight stereo module that's, included in the 260 VU. And we spent a couple years in R&D on this one, and it's not an easy one to do. Probably why it's not really been done yet to this degree. And we tried finding substitutes for some of the hard stuff like the RMS section and the VCA, and we ended up just sticking with the original parts because just finding the obsolete original parts. We're still going to be able to make hundreds of them, so we're really happy. But it's there's nothing really worldly different going on in this to adapt it, or anything like that. It's that circuit,
It's going to be true to that, which is really how all your products are made, right? I mean, I know we've talked about this before, which is one of the reasons why you also build in small batches, because you want to make sure you get the right components and that you're not going to swap something out and put something else in just because that's all you can get at that particular moment so you can sell 10 more units. You want to make them true to whatever the design was, whatever you came up with. You said, that's the design. We're going to be as close and as authentic to the original as we can. And we're going to source the right parts. And if that means we can't make as many as quickly, that's okay. But that's what we're going to do. Yeah,
especially if it's going to change the sound of what the actual finished result. We just won't make it. Won't do it.
Right. No, that's great. Yeah. And that's a really great approach. I mean, a lot of companies go in the opposite direction because they're mass production, and that's the way it is. And that's one of the things I think that makes your company special is that it's small and you really want to stay true to the original sound, which is important because some of these pieces, as we're talking about, if you try to go buy a vintage one of these things, they're very, very expensive. If they're in good working order, right? They're extremely expensive. Some of them are very sought after. They're very hard to find. So to be able to get something that's modern, that's new, that sounds like the old stuff, because it is really the guts for all intent and purposes is the old stuff. But it's not, 45 years old. So
right. Age and components drifted over 45 years. Yeah. And the vintage market the last couple years, really since the pandemic, has just gone crazy.
I can only imagine. Imagine. So is there any other I know about those two. So we're talking about, everyone, the LA3 and the DBX. Is there anything else that you have coming that you can share with us, or what do you got? Anything else on the drawing board that you like? We're working on some really cool things, or what's going on?
We're always working on new things.
I got a couple of suggestions if you have a couple of old pieces.
Yeah, we've definitely we're working on a lot of new things. It's still like we usually we'll probably announce them at NAMM in April. Whatever next up, it's whatever gets to a certain point. So there's just a revolving door of ideas of things that are always being worked on. So it's exciting. And then once we feel it's ready to show, then we let it out. at this point. We used to tease things more when they were in development phases, but then sometimes you'd hit it, something would happen, or you can't get a part, or you can't do something, and then you talked about releasing something and you can't do it, so you don't want to go too far, get ahead of yourself too much sometimes with things, as exciting as it is,
Yeah, so you can actually make it and produce it, right? Yep. That makes sense. That's really cool. So we're going to see more products from you guys coming out, I'm sure, over the next year, which is great. Let's talk a little bit for a second about the Trainwreck series, which I think is really cool. This is something that when you first showed it to me, I was like, that's freaking genius. Why didn't I think it? For people that don't know, I've done some pictures on my Instagram about the EQP, which is a Trainwreck model. It's like relicking of audio gear, which is, I don't know why no one else, maybe that has been done by someone else, but I don't know anyone else, a company that's ever done that. It's really big in the guitar world. Everyone wants to relic their guitars and drag them behind a car and make them look like they came out of a dumpster. And that's got a cool factor to it. And when I saw that you were like relicking your gear, I was like, what the hell is that? That's awesome. And I got to say, that's the one that I have. Because I know Dave, my buddy, when he said, I said, yeah, we're getting an EQP, we're getting a Trainwreck. And he goes, I like them shiny and new. I hope they're not too beat up. And I got to tell you, when we both looked at it, it's tastefully done. It doesn't, when you see like guitars that are relics, sometimes they're overdone, like where it's like, it doesn't look natural at all. It looks like somebody dragged it, behind a car. But your stuff looks like it's aged just the right amount. At least the one that I have does. Tell me how you came about. What made you decide to do that? Is that something that you were been thinking about for a while, or I can't believe no one else has done it, to be honest.
So it started as an idea by Dr. Bill, who's, he's affiliated with Louder Than Lift Off and a part of that. And he has an artist friend, he's out in Arizona, and he did one of his early silver bullets. And he relicked it, in that way. And all his friends would always comment that it was so awesome. It looked so cool. And he's been a great friend and supporter of Audioscape over the years. And he suggested that we do this. And so he put us in touch with Lawrence Trainer. That's the artist. And you're right. It can really get cheesy really quick when you're doing something like this. So it has to be tastefully. Each one is actually an individual work of art. In a sense that they're like a snowflake. Every single one is different that he does. Right. So, and they're numbered, and there's, the certificate as well that comes with it. And it's just a really cool, unique idea. And I feel like he does it justice. And I don't even know all the methods he uses to make these the way they are. But when you see it in person, sometimes it's hard in a picture to judge it.
It is.
And somebody made a comment, I think, on a forum, like, did they just dip it in motor oil? I was like, oh, man, you just got to see it in person. Here's some closer pictures. I think we even posted some better fidelity pictures so they could see what was going on. But yeah, he really does an excellent job. So his name's Lawrence Trainer. So we called it the Trainwreck series. And
cool. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And and also what I like about it is, what better way to show you build in small batches than to do something like this, where it's each piece is individual. And we're thinking about making our own just sales day for the Trainwreck series, maybe like Trainwreck Tuesday or something like that. So I'd be on the lookout for that. I think we're gonna start, instead of sprinkling them in with our regular inventory updates, just have them be their own thing. That if anyone's interested in that, they can just go on this day and get those particular pieces. So
yeah, I think it's a great idea. And like I said, it does look different in person in a positive way. Like I said, my buddy Dave, he when he looked at it on your website, when I told him you were shipping me one, he goes, I don't know. It's cool, but I don't know. And as soon as he walked in the room, he goes, I love that thing, man. It just looks so cool. And it does. It really does. I was like, this is freaking brilliant. I want all my gear to be Trainwreck now. This is awesome. I think it's a great idea. No one else has really done that. At least, like you said, that's where you got the idea from, but you don't see, I've never really seen it. Like all the the bigger companies that make stuff that have been making gear for decades. I've never seen anybody relic pro audio gear. I think that's a brilliant idea. It's a freaking brilliant idea.
So much fun. And that's what it's all about. Like, this is why we do this, right? It's for fun. It's for the love of what and it's a lot of fun. And like the tactile feel of the knobs completely different from how it feels when it's new. It's yeah, those knobs on the EQPA, yeah, when they're Trainwreck, they feel really cool. Like
Yeah, it's funny because the knobs to have the little line so you can see where you are and you can't really see it. And I'm going, that's the, who cares where the knob, it gets right back to who cares where the knob is. I know it's off and I just go, yeah, that's about right. And that could mean it's at 10 or 8 or 7 or, where again, it's that visual thing. It's like, stop looking at who cares? If you think you're boosting it too much, when does it sound right? And that wherever the knobs land, and who really cares? So I like that too. It's kind of funny because you don't really know where you are in the taper. You just listen and go, yeah, that sounds about right. And then you can look at it and say, oh yeah, it's because it's all worn away and it's old looking and that's a really cool. So yeah, guys, check out if you want something that looks kind of relic and vintage and if you want to tell everyone you have, a real old piece of gear in your studio, you can get a Trainwreck series and it looks like it's been around for 45 years. It looks really cool. So I know you got limited time. So I just want to ask you, is there anything else going on in the Audioscape world that you haven't told us already that we need to know? What else do we need to know?
I always keep saying it, but always a simple point. We're gonna be offering more and more products as we grow, and we are growing. We're adding more folks in assembly, more people helping out and finishing. I'm still checking everything before it goes out myself. We're growing, and that doesn't mean we're gonna find ways to cut corners. We're gonna just find ways to grow and produce more the same way that we're doing it. And so just be on the lookout. Our inventory drops are going to keep growing and growing. So like if sometimes it gets frustrating, but last couple sales, there's things that last, to the next day. And, so definitely be on the lookout. Yeah, and that's great because we want, a lot of times, with the time difference overseas and things like that, there's, some people in Australia, for instance, have a hard time getting stuff, when we drop at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Right.
So things that are available, through the night, it's great. So we're listing more and more and we're growing, and, we're just grateful to everyone for supporting us as we do that. It's just been incredible.
Well, I think it's great. You guys make good stuff. If you didn't make good stuff, you wouldn't have that problem about we can't keep enough in stock, right? I mean, it really comes down to, at the end of the day, is the stuff good? Does it sound good? And it does. We have several pieces here and we haven't found a bad one in the bunch. I mean, all of them are solid. They're built really well. Like you pick them up and you go, holy shit. When you, sometimes you get into this thing about, people that make replicas of the classic stuff and they make them for so much less money. And in some products you pick it up and you could tell why it's less money. Yours, you don't get that. Like, it's like you pick it up and you go, wow, this thing is put together. You can see and you can feel, and the casings are not really thin and they're thick. I mean, like with the 1176s, I've had many 1176s in my hand in my life. And I know when I picked yours up, I went, that's an 11. I mean, it doesn't look, different or cheap or cost cutting. It looks like and feels like, and just as important, it sounds like, that's what it is. I mean, the only difference is one says Audioscape and the other one may have a Universal Audio underneath the badge. That's about the only difference from what I can tell. And like I tell everyone with hardware, like with any hardware, even if you gave me two 76Ds, there is, if you really listen, they're all a little special. It's not like a plugin where one plugin and another plugin, they're identical sounding. Hardware's not like that. And that's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of it, that they sound good. So you guys make really great stuff. And again, I can't thank you enough for coming on, and I can't thank you enough for supporting what we do here. It means a lot. And I tell everyone, if you're in the market for gear, go at least take a look at what you got, because you got a lot of good stuff and you have, all the classics there pretty much. I mean, they're all there. What else do you want? Although I know there's one piece that you don't make yet that I would like to see you make, but we could talk about that off. Actually, it's two pieces. We could talk about that afterwards.
You know.
All right, man. Well, again, Grace, thank you so much. Thank you so much, man, for joining us. And anytime you want to come back on, or, if you have any news or anything coming on with Audioscape, you're more than welcome to come back and visit with us.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much, David. Love the channel. Love how you guys do everything. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you later.